So when I was first learning to code, probably the one thing that used to really amaze me was the navigation menus on sites that seemed to whiz out from nowhere, drop down with some cool effect, and just simply seemed so different to the regular kind of menu you would code in a beginner project. It felt to me like pure voodoo as to how these responsive navigation designs worked, especially when it came to coding my own, because they never felt like they worked quite right, and I'd always just go back to using Bootstrap or something similar to do it for me. So I wanted to make this tutorial for all of you out there who also might be struggling with building a responsive navigation by showing you the super simple way. And you can use this as a base to create your own more exotic designs, but I'm going to make this as straightforward as possible because when you understand the fundamentals, the magic stuff doesn't seem so scary. So let me show you what we're going to be building. Our final product should look a little bit like this, a simple landing page with a bit of content on it which isn't really relevant to the tutorial, but the main thing we want to be focusing on is this navbar at the top here with this menu that we've got. And of course on a desktop display this looks okay, we've got the option to select all of these navigation elements here, but as soon as we shrink the page down, what we want to do is hide those items, the navigation, and then put it into a separate place that can be toggled with the traditional hamburger icon. And of course we've got the option to close the menu as well. And if we select any of the elements that are inside of here, they're actually anchor tags that could take us to another part of our page. If we actually click on one of those, it also closes the menu, and notice the hamburger icon reappears ready for us to open that menu again if we need to. As promised, it's super simple. I've even taken all of the color out of it. We've got just a grayscale image and text here, but this is going to provide you with a base for creating your own responsive menus. And we're going to go through all of the fundamentals of getting this set up, and then you can add your own embellishments later depending on what project you're working on. So let's start coding and get our responsive menu set up. So we've got a super simple project setup here in Visual Studio Code. We've got a HTML page with some boilerplate markup, and we've got a CSS file linked already, which obviously is going to be for styling the landing page, but we'll also put all of the responsive media queries in there as well. And we've also got a JavaScript file, which we'll be putting a small amount of JavaScript in just to toggle that responsive menu when we're in smaller screen sizes. And the only other thing that you're going to need for the project is an image file as well. And I have just one image here just for the background on the landing page, and this is a WebP image just to make Google happy when they're doing their performance checks. Okay, so I'm just going to close that up now just to give us a bit more space on the screen, and the first thing we're going to do is get all of our markup on the page, and I'm going to do this all in one go, and then we'll go through styling it shortly, because what we really want to focus on in this tutorial is the responsive elements and the media queries and toggling those classes. So let's start off with a header tag, and inside there I'm going to put a nav tag as well. So notice we're trying to use the semantically correct tags for the relevant parts of our landing page, and I'm just going to give this a class as well, just so we can easily select this element and other elements inside it. And the first thing we had in our original design is a kind of logo or a branding on the left hand side. So that would be traditionally where you would find a logo, just on that left, but it might be in somewhere else. So I'm just going to create a div inside of there with a class of brand, and this could be an image if you have something, but I'm just going to put some text inside there just saying dev agency, because the landing page has got a sort of theme of it being a developer agency, although it could be anything else that you like. So the next thing I'm going to put in here is actually the navigation links that we saw in the finished product before. So I'm just going to create another div with a class of navbar links, and inside of here we're going to have an unordered list, and then I'm going to create some list items that have all got anchor tags inside there, and just sticking the href of each of those just to a pound sign so that it doesn't reload the page for us. And we'll have one for home, we'll have another for services, another one for about us, and then also we'll have contact us too. Okay, so that's pretty much our header done for the moment. We still need to add the actual hamburger icons, but we're going to come back to that in a little while. But first of all, let's put the rest of the content on the page. As I say, it's not really relevant to the tutorial, but it's useful to have some more content to give a bit of context. So we're going to have this hero section at the top, which is the where we had the background image, which had a heading level 1 tag, and you can put any text in there you like, but what we had before was we are developers. And then we're going to have another section and just some more information or a description of who the organization is. So we'll say who we are, Then we'll have a paragraph tag in here just using some lorem ipsum text, and that should be enough for us to get going with some content on our landing page. Obviously it doesn't look great at the moment because we haven't added any styles, so let's go ahead and add some styles so that we can start working on actually hiding the menu on smaller screen sizes. So let's head on over to our app.css file, and the first thing I want to do is just add a few CSS variables or custom properties if you like, and I'm just going to create a couple of text colors that we can use throughout the rest of the style sheet. So here we've got a bit of a lightish grey color that we can use, and we don't need it to be RGBA, just RGB is okay. And we'll just have another one for white as well, so we only really use some grey and white text on the page. But here's just a couple of variables that we can just use within the rest of the style sheet. Okay, so what we'll then do is just go on to target the body tag and just do a bit of a reset by removing any margin on there. And also we'll set the font family for the majority of the actual content on the page. We're going to use the font family of impact and all of the associated fallbacks. And that will just give us a bit of an interesting font to work with. But of course, if you're putting your own project together, this is where you would put your own customizations in. And then let's target the section with the hero, ID of hero in there. And we just want to set a background image to be URL. And then in our image folder, we should have that background.webp file. And then we'll set the background size to cover, and then set the background repeat if we do get larger screen sizes and the image overflows to be no repeat. And then we'll set an explicit height for that section of 400 pixels, and then set the display to flex because I want to basically align all of the content into the center. When I say all the content, it was literally just the heading level 1 tag that we've got in there, but those two rules should just center that for us. And so section hero and then the heading level 1 tag, let's put a bit of padding on there because that will help on smaller screen sizes, just to move it away from the edge of the screen. And we'll make the font a bit bigger, quite a lot bigger actually, and we'll set the color equal to one of the variables we've set up, and then we'll use that white color. Okay, and while we're here, let's just finish off the other section that we've got, which was had the ID of description, and we'll also just put some padding on there just so it pushes everything in and help to line that up. And also in the section with the ID of description, we had a P tag, a paragraph tag, and we'll just change the font family on there. It's a bit overwhelming to have that impact font on a lot of text. This content's not important. What we're focusing on really is the navbar. So speaking of which, let's go and move on and add some styles to the navbar. So when I was thinking of what styles to put onto this navbar, and especially to make it easy and also to make it easy for you to use in your own projects, I thought let's just go for a standard fixed navbar at the top of the page, just so it overlays on top of the background image that we've got. You could keep this separate if you like by not using a fixed position, but I think it works quite well in this example, and 9 times out of 10 when you see this sort of navbar, they're always attached to the top of the page that you're working on, so the user's always got navigation accessible to them. Okay, so let's target the navbar class that we had, and then I'm going to set, as mentioned, the position to be fixed, and then we're going to set the width to be 100% as well. So you can see, as I say, that fixed position just to make sure that sits on top of the background of the hero section. Okay, and then let's set the display of this to be flex and make sure the items in there are centered. And then what we want to do is with the content inside there, which is basically the brand and the unordered list at the moment, is to set the space between just to push them apart. And just to distinguish that this is a navbar, I'm going to set the background color to be basically black, but with an opacity of 0.2. So just to distinguish where the navbar is for us really, you might want to just keep this plain so that it sits on top of the image normally. Again, it really does come down to how you're going to customize it for your project. And we'll also, while we're here, we'll just target that brand, which we've got inside of the navbar. So navbar brand, I'm going to set a bit of padding on here, so 0.75 rems and 1 rems on the left and right. We're going to use the light text color, so with our CSS variables, let's use light text. And we'll set the font size to be 1.5 rems. And also what I'll do is set the text transform property to uppercase, so we get some nice bold letters there. And I'm not sure if this is going to make too much difference, but make sure the font weight is 900. The next thing we need to work on is the unordered list. And there's a few standard things that we need to do. You've probably done this kind of thing a million times before. But for the unordered list, I'm going to remove the margin on there because it's got quite a lot of margin applied by default. I am going to apply some padding on the right hand side of 1 rem, just so it moves away from the corner of the screen. And then we're going to set the display of this to be flex. So basically all of the items in the unordered list actually sit on a row. And we'll also put a gap in between each of those of 1 rem. And of course, we want to get rid of the list style. So we'll set the list style type to be none. It just removes the bullet points. And again, that font is a bit overpowering for those list items. So we'll say the font family is sans serif, and it just makes it a little bit easier to read. And then the other thing we want to do is just adjust the text color for each of the list items. But because they're in a link tag inside of those items, we need to be a bit more specific with our CSS and target the anchor tag itself directly. I remember this was always one of those things when I was learning CSS initially that it always used to confuse me, is why can't I put the rules higher up in the selectors that I'm using? And it's because of CSS's specificity, and we just need to make sure that we're targeting where the actual rules are set up, and in this case it is on the anchor tags. So if you ever do get frustrated with CSS not behaving properly, it's probably because you're just applying the rules in the wrong place. Okay, so that is our landing page pretty much complete. It looks very similar to what we had in the initial demo at the start of the project, but as you can see, if we do actually start to squish the viewport, the size of the browser that we've got, the menu doesn't behave very well. And if we were to open this up in the mobile view as well, such as on a small iPhone, you can see it's not very usable. All of the content in the menu is squished up, and that's where we want to activate the hamburger icon and actually hide this menu. So let me introduce you to media queries. So if you haven't come across media queries before, they're essentially a way for us to adjust things that you've got on your page based on the size of the screen or the actual dimensions of the viewport that the user's currently seeing. So we're going to use it in our example so that when the user squishes the screen to a point where we can't actually fit all of that navbar content on there anymore, we're actually going to hide all of the unordered lists. So what does a media query actually look like? Well, we use the keyword @media, and then you can actually target different types of media, the one being screen and the other being print. So we can actually then specify when we want to actually apply this rule. We're going to say @media screen, and then you can query for different dimensions on the page, and then we're going to set up some rules inside this to actually make some changes. So we'll say @media screen and max width. So when the browser is at a max width of 600 pixels, so in other words, anything smaller than 600 pixels will actually trigger these rules that are inside of here. And then it's simply a case of writing more CSS rules for all the elements we've got on our page to do different things, and any CSS rule in here is actually valid. So we're going to first of all start off by targeting the navbar links. So we'll say the class that we've got set up. We're actually going to say the display is none. And you can see there our navigation has actually disappeared, and you might be able to see here in Chrome that the dimensions are actually shown in the top right hand corner. So you can see we're at about 590 pixels at the moment, and as soon as we go over 600 pixels, we should find that the items reappear, and going back under to 598, 595, this rule is taking effect, and the element that has the navbar links inside is actually removed from the page. So that's the premise that we're going to be using to do our responsive navigation, but at the moment it's not much good to us because essentially it's just removing them from the display of the page, but we actually want to put in a hamburger icon so that we can open those navbar links up in a different fashion. So what we need to do is actually first of all create the hamburger icon and put some JavaScript in there to actually toggle some classes on it. So let's go back to our index.html page where we're going to put in a button for the actual responsive menu toggle. So I'm going to use a button tag here, and what I want to put inside of here are two icons, one for the opening of the responsive menu, which will essentially be the hamburger icon, and one for closing it as well. So we're going to go over to a website called Hero Icons, where there's loads of different icons that we can grab SVGs for. Feel free to use your own icon library if you want. There's Font Awesome and other different ones that you can use as well. Just do a search in here for hamburger. So you can see here there's different ones available. We can either have 2, 3 or 4 bars. Let's go for the 3 bar one that we had in the demo before. And we're going to stick that in here. And let's just go over here to the classes as well. And I'll just remove these classes that have been provided for us. And I'm going to give this the class of open icon. So that's our opening icon, the hamburger icon. And let's just grab another one from over here for close as well. So we've just got a big X. Again, you can use something different if you like. And let's pop that in there too. And we'll just add a class here of close icon. So we should find now in our page that we've got 2 icons that you can see over here. So they don't look great at the moment, but we'll fix that in our CSS in just a second. But before we do that, we just want to make sure that we've got some accessibility on this button as well. And also an ID so that we can target it easily as well. We could use class as well. So let's give this an ARIA label of toggle menu. So just for screen reader and accessibility reasons. And we'll also put an ID in here. And I'm going to give this a really long name actually. So I'm going to say responsive menu toggle button. You can use something shorter if you like, but I like to use descriptive names for a lot of my things there. So we've got one button and it's got 2 icons in there. So we need to kind of fix that because we need to only show one icon at the same time. So before we go on to the toggling of that, let's actually fix the display of the button and everything else in there. So the ID that we've got there is responsive menu toggle button. So first of all, I'm going to set the background color to be transparent, remove the border, and also set the cursor to be pointer. So when you hover over it, you can actually, looks like you can click it. We're going to set the display initially to be none because we don't want that actually displaying on the page, at least not until we've actually hit the media query point. In fact, let's just go back so we can actually see all of the elements there for the moment. So you can see if we don't have that, the buttons are still going to be displaying. So we're initially going to hide those. But let's also set the position to be absolute. So that we can actually position it over on the right hand side. Let's just show it one more time there. So you may just be able to make out very faintly those 2 buttons are over there, which is exactly where we want them when we need to actually display them. So let's add in a couple more rules in here. So for the responsive menu toggle button, so let's add a couple more rules in there. So for the SVGs inside of our button, let's give them a height of 1.5 rem and a width of 1.5 rem too, nice square. And the color of them, we're going to use our CSS variable of light text. Set the position to be absolute again, and just give them a little bit of top and right so that they center up nicely on the page. So let's just display them again one more time before we start working on that. So you can see here that the hamburger icon will be there and the X is underneath it as well. But we don't want those displaying initially, at least when the other menu items, the navigation is actually showing. Okay, so if you remember, we gave the SVGs their own classes, and I'm going to target those now. So for the open icon, I want to make sure that's displayed at least initially, and we also want to target the close icon as well, because we want to make sure that is removed from the document or not shown on the document, at least initially. So what we should find is when we go into this responsive view, the first thing that's shown is the open icon with the close icon that is hidden. But we're actually going to be toggling a class on the button. So we're going to be adding this class of open. So when that class is actually available, the SVG with the class of open icon inside there, we actually want to hide that. So we're kind of hiding the hamburger at this point. And what we want to show is the close icon. So in this case, we'll say the display is block. Oops, extra U there. And so these rules will basically handle the toggling of the icons, depending on whether the actual navigation is open or closed. And we're going to do that with our JavaScript, but let's check this is actually appearing on the screen when we go to the smaller screen size. So what we want to do inside of the media query is the responsive menu toggle button, which will show either icon. We want to make sure that is displayed. So don't forget we've set its display property to none at the moment. So we want to make sure that it's displayed when we hit that smaller screen size. So now when we actually shrink our page down, the navbar link should disappear and we should get the hamburger icon appearing. And you can see when we hover over it that we're ready to click it. We just need some JavaScript to actually flip between the two button states and to ultimately show us the navbar links again to actually put them back on the page in a different position. And we're going to do that in our JavaScript by just simply toggling a class in a couple of places. So let's head on over there now to our JavaScript so we can do that. And I'm going to create a variable to hold a reference to our button. Let's create a variable called responsive menu button. And I'm going to use the getElementById function on the document to get the responsive menu toggle button, which is essentially our hamburger icon and also our close icon as well. So let's just keep that in a variable there ready for us. So basically on that button, what we're going to do is set up an event listener, and the event listener is click, of course, when the user clicks on it. And what we're going to do is toggle the class on this responsive menu button element. So we'll access its class list property, and we're going to toggle the class of open, and that will toggle between these different rules that we set up here to hide or show the relevant icon. So that should be working for us now. We just need to click on the button a couple of times to check that's working, and it seems to be fine. But of course it's not actually showing us the navbar links again, so that's the final piece of the puzzle really, is to actually show the navbar links. And in the demo, in the final product that we had, the navbar links were down here in a list, so we need to set up some rules in our CSS to actually accommodate that. So let's go down to our media query to actually set that up. So the navbar links are initially set to none. When we're in this smaller screen size, what we're going to say is navbar links dot open. So again, we're going to use a class called open. We want to set the display of them to be block, and it'll just toggle between the hidden and visible states. And the other thing we're going to do is say for the navbar links and the unordered list that's inside of there, I'm going to set the width of those to be 100%. And we're going to set the flex direction. It's already set as flex, remember, from our initial rule that we set up, to be column, and that should stack them vertically for us. And we're going to set the padding to be 1 rem as well. And I will just use, again, so we can distinguish it, darker black color with an opacity of 0.8 this time, just so we can see those menu items when they reappear on the page, and we can see where these navbar links are appearing. Okay, so that's some simple styling setup for us, but we actually need to set up the toggle in our JavaScript again. So let's go back over there, and we can trigger the open class on those navbar links inside of this event listener here, because it's the same action when we click on that button, but we just need to first get a reference to them. So let's set up a new variable called navbar links is equal to document query selector this time, because we want to target a class of navbar links. So inside of our event listener, what we're going to do is say navbar links dot class list dot toggle open. So what we should find now when we actually toggle the hamburger icon is that the navbar links now appear, but it's not going to appear exactly as we would like it. You can see it's squashed up in the navbar still, which isn't really where we want it. It's not exactly a responsive design for us. So essentially it's doing what we need. It's just not laying out quite as we would expect. So the fix for that is just to customize the way that this navbar actually handles elements in its flex container. So it won't actually affect the hamburger because it's absolutely positioned in that corner. So let's target the navbar class inside of our responsive or smaller screen size in the media query here. So we're going to set the flex direction to be column, and also just make sure the items are set to flex start. So now what we should find if we try that toggle one more time is that even though the navbar links are still in the navbar, they're actually pushed to the bottom of it because we've got a column set up. And as mentioned, the hamburger icon and the button hasn't moved from over there, and that's down to the absolute positioning that we've set up. The only thing we might want to do is make sure that this stretches all the way across the page, just because it looks a bit messy if we're changing the color here and it doesn't go all the way across the page. So let's set the width of the navbar links to be 100%. So that's looking a lot better, and of course the toggle still works. And if we open up the screen size a little bit more, you should find that the nav links come back, and then shrinking down again gives us the hamburger, and we can toggle that menu on and off. So all of those fancy responsive navigations that we saw at the start of the tutorial, they all boil down to this, just having a simple layout for your navbar and then just toggling a class on and off in the relevant places to either hide or show the content, all depending on what screen size you're viewing your content at. But there's one thing that people forget when they're actually setting things up like this, and that's that when we actually click on one of these links, although they don't go anywhere in our app, it doesn't actually close the menu. And you'd expect that to happen if you're actually selecting something from the menu and selecting that item there. You'd expect to be taken to that location, whether it's on this page or somewhere else, and you'd expect the menu to close as well. So let's just tidy that up in our JavaScript. And it's a really simple thing to do. We just need to target all of the links that are inside of the navigation, or rather the nav links that we've got there, and then set up an event listener for each one so that when you click it, it first of all closes the menu and also resets the icon back to a hamburger. So that's pretty simple to do. So let's just create a new variable called all nav links, and it's document query selector. And in this case, we want to use query selector all because we're selecting multiple elements. And inside of the navbar class, or navbar links rather, we're going to get all of the list item elements. So that will have all of the actual links, all of the list items that we want to actually set this up for. So for all nav links, we're just going to call the for each array method. And then for each link that's inside of there, we're going to set up an event listener. So link.add event listener. And of course it's a click event. And what happens when we actually click one of the links? What do we want to do? Well, for the navbar links, so this is the overall container that we want to show or hide, we just want to access its class list property, and we want to remove the open class. And then for the responsive menu button, that's the hamburger icon, or it'll be the close if the menu is open. So from that class list, we also want to remove the class of open. So now we've got events set up for each of the links inside of our nav links container. So let's open that up, and if we click on any of those, what we should find is two things. The actual menu is closed and the icon is reset to a hamburger. So hopefully you've seen that it is super simple to set up a responsive navigation like this. And of course, it's just a base. This is something that you can customize and add your own bells and whistles for your own projects. But something that isn't super simple is creating a responsive video background. And if you want to learn more about how to do that, then check out this next tutorial where we're going to be creating a responsive video background on a page and learning about all the problems and tricks that you need to solve it to get it to work properly. But that's it for this tutorial. I'll see you next time.